Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chalk Talk podcast. I am Armando Marsal. As always, with me is Bobby Gomes. How's it going, brother? Thursday night? How's
Going
it
well.
going?
Thursday night, getting ready for the weekend. Kind of pumped.
Yeah.
Another terrible Thursday game, but I don't know.
I know.
It's football, at least this weekend.
It's probably going to be a dreadful game today. I am wearing a Miami Dolphins sweater only because I am sitting under the AC vent at my house, so it gets pretty chilly down here. But not too excited about them tonight. I think they're going to have a pretty poor performance here in Houston. Could be wrong, but this is just an awful situation for this team, man. So before we jump into the main slate, let's kind of with all the injuries and things like that, what's your approach this week? I think there's a lot of injury news information that we're still waiting for, and some players who haven't been able to get on the practice field. For instance, Matt Breida, he wasn't able to give it a go today, and it's just looking like he's not going to play this week, which could give someone like Raheem Mostert some extra reps here in a really good matchup. Talk to me about your preparation for this week and kind of how you're gauging some of this news throughout the week.
Yeah, I'm just waiting on news, kind of like everyone else. I actually really liked Mostert going into the week, even if Breida played for tournaments on DraftKings or whichever DFS site you're kind of playing on, if it's FanDuel or whatnot. But basically just waiting on news, and that's how I'm going to kind of go about my builds, and my contest selection is waiting for that news in terms of injuries and stuff, or at least a little more clarity.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same boat. It's kind of weird because this is a week where some of the top running backs are in pretty good spots and pretty good situations, but a lot of the value that has opened up so far this week is also, basically the running back position. You got Jalen Richard. We just talked about Mostert. There's a couple running backs pretty cheap that, make a lot of sense this week, I think. So going to be interesting for roster construction, I think. That's kind of where I'm at, where Todd Gurley's obviously in play every week. You got Kareem Hunt in a smash spot. So many different ways you can build your lineup this week. So I do think it's going to be an interesting week. Any other thoughts here? Of the way you're building your rosters right now, how you're approaching it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you brought up, basically we have a couple of the really high-end running backs in great spots, and the value opened up at running back. Just because last week Zeke busted as high-end chalk. So it's just another thing to keep in mind in terms of game theory and which way people may end up going. I like Gurley. I like that game, the Green Bay Rams game. I think that's obviously a very good game in general, you could game stack it. I really like Goff and Gurley as a correlation play. Obviously, QB running back stacks. So a lot of people think it's a negative correlation, but in that offense, Gurley's going to see a bunch of targets within that game. Just how highly total that game is, both teams implied team total. I think Goff to Gurley is something that you can definitely use in tournaments and maybe even in cash games this week.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat with you for this week. So, all right, man, let's jump right into it, because the first game right off the bat is one that I have plenty of interest in. I think there's some nice options here, and that's the Broncos heading to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. This game has a 53.5 over-under. It's actually gone down 2 points since it opened. The Chiefs are 10-point favorites with an implied team total of 31.75. The Broncos having a 21.75 implied team total. Give me your thoughts on this game. I think there's a lot of, I think there's value in this game, and I also think there's some really elite plays. So give me your thoughts on where you stand in this game.
I really like Travis Kelce. The first game that they played, he was heavy chalk, and he really didn't. I don't think he scored. He didn't kind of hit the ceiling everyone thought he was going to hit. So I think he's interesting. And he also last week and the week before on I think he played the Patriots 2 weeks ago, and then last week they played Cincinnati. He didn't really do too much. Everyone's kind of might shift their focus to Kareem Hunt, who I like as well. I think Kareem Hunt's a great play, point per dollar on the slate. I like both of them. It's just going to come down to like who I'm going to roster on Sunday. But like you said, with the value opening up, you might be able to kind of go off a high-end running back and go up to a guy like Kelce, who should be one of the better tight ends on the board this week. I think my projections have him at the number 2 tight end of the week. So Broncos have been pretty tough, pretty bad against tight ends as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good spot for Kelce, without a doubt. He's been pretty consistent all year long. He had a pretty nice game against this same defense in week 4. He caught 7 passes for 78 yards and a touchdown, scoring 20.8 DraftKings points. I like the running backs from both teams here quite a bit. I think Kareem Hunt is in a great spot. Denver has just been giving it up to the running backs this season, allowing 951 rushing yards already, 7 rushing touchdowns. In addition, 31 receptions, 236 yards, and a receiving touchdown here for running back. So really good spot. We've seen Hunt just be utilized a lot more in the passing game in recent weeks. 6 targets in each of the last 2 games with 5 catches in each of those games. 3 receiving touchdowns in the last 2 games, all right? So clearly he's, after the slow start to the week, he's picking it up. I think he is underpriced considering here the game script, or the potential game script according to Vegas, the matchup. I just think that he's someone that you just go ahead and auto play it here this week. It's just too good of a situation for him to fail in. I know he can definitely fail, but 19 rush attempts for 121 yards and a touchdown last time against this same defense. And also added 3 catches for 54 yards. Definitely a smash spot here. I also have.
He wasn't being utilized at that time in the passing game, like when they played them originally. I think it was around like week 1 or week 2.
Yeah, he wasn't. He was just getting started. He actually only received 4 targets that game. He did break a nice catch, I think, for 20-plus yards. So, again, the usage has been much higher the last 2 weeks, like you mentioned. I just think it's too good of a spot to ignore here. I think he's going to be chalk pretty much this week, but rightfully so, man. Right now I see his projected ownership at 21 to 25%. I'm okay with just taking that and finding some, unique way to get a lower owned guy elsewhere. Do you agree with that? Like, is this chalk you're just gonna?
No, I agree that. I really like Hunt. I was just kind of saying that. It's funny that the value opened up at running back. No, I agree with it. He's in my first cash game build, and I think I wrote him up in cash.
I definitely think this is a 3 running back week. Like I definitely think it's just play 3 running backs. I wish I had 5 flex positions so I can just play, 5 running backs, to be honest with you, because I like so many here. We'll get to the rest later. I actually like Phillip Lin quite a bit here. What are your thoughts on him? I really do think this is a good game environment for him. They're going to be chasing points. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He's been pretty reliable on a weekly basis when you look at his fantasy production. Kansas City Chiefs have also struggled against, running backs this season as well, allowing 709 yards in 7 games. So just shy over 100 yards, rushing yards per game to the running back position. Do you have any interest there on someone like him?
Yeah, I like Lindsay. I think that's a good call. Obviously, they're going to be playing from behind the Broncos, and he does catch passes out of the backfield. No, I think it makes for a good value point per dollar. I think he's around like 2.9 to 2.7 to 2.9. So I like that play. He's at 5.2. Their running backs did pretty well versus in the first game. I watched that game. Royce Freeman even had a good game. That's the only thing with like the value that's on the slate is that obviously Lindsey is going to be kind of sharing the workload. And if Mozart's a guy who is, if Breda sits, like I think I'd rather roster Mozart just without having anyone really back there. Well, he has Alf, but I feel like Mozart would be in for more work than actually. I don't know.
I don't think Alfred Morris would really feed too much into Mostert's role. To be honest with you, I just think Morris has just been awful when he's on the field. So I don't think he's going to eat up too much of the opportunity here for Mostert here. But yeah, I'm kind of with you though. Like I like Lindsey, I really do. But the thing is, it's just very, very difficult because you know that he's not getting the full workload. It's going to get anywhere between, 13 and 17 touches, I guess you can predict him for. But that's, it's not guaranteed. So it is a little bit tough. But I just think, pretty much the situation here, the matchup, everything kind of lines up well for someone like Lindsey this week. Any pass catchers here, knowing that the Broncos are going to be chasing points? Any pass catchers for the Broncos here?
Well, I think you got to consider DT and Sanders, but I really don't want to play DT, and I'd rather play Sanders. But I think that there's better plays than Sanders at cheaper prices. I'd rather play T.Y. Hilton at 200 cheaper. Rather play John Brown. Actually, I don't know. I might. Sanders is I don't know. Sanders isn't the worst.
I like Sanders quite a bit this week. I just think it's a good matchup. The volume has been there for him all season long. He accounts for 24% of the target share here for the Broncos and 18.8% of the red zone targets. So he also has some pretty good recent history against this defense. I think the game script is going to favor him. So I do have interest in Sanders. It's very tough for me to ignore that price on Demaryius Thomas. I know he has been up and down all season long. He didn't have a good game against KC the last time out. But, man, it's just so tempting at 4,900 knowing he has that 20-plus fantasy point upside where he can smash that price tag out of the water. And you might need him in your lineup, to win a high-dollar tournament here. So, I don't know, man. I really like him. Again, it's all going to be on roster construction this week. So, going to be tough to pay down for everyone, but I just feel there's a lot of good value, and I think Thomas is a very, very sharp value in tournaments. I wouldn't touch him in cash games just because of volatility concerns, but aside from that, man, I do think these two receivers are in pretty good spots. Mahomes, any interest in him? I mean, the price is a bit too high. I typically don't like to pay up for the quarterback position, but this might be a week where you can. I do think this is a good matchup for him at home. The Broncos are a solid defense, but nowhere near, the defense that they once were where they were complete shutdown. He did struggle in Denver. And by struggle, I mean he threw for 304 yards and a touchdown. He also ran one in. So 25 DK points, but the type of year that Mahomes is having, that is considered struggling. I do think he has plenty of upside. I'm not going to talk anyone off of him. However, I probably won't be going there this week.
Yeah, no, I like Mahomes. I think he makes for a good play in both tournaments, and I think you can use him in cash once again. He had over 30 points last week. I don't hate the play. He obviously has the potential to hit the 300-yard bonus week in, week out with guys like Tyreek Hill and Watkins and Kelce. So he's always in play in that regard. I think he's over 30 DK points in the last pretty much all season. I don't think he's gone under it. So
yeah. He's been just clutch, man. Anything else from this game that you like or that you have interest in that I might have missed and I haven't mentioned?
Yeah, he's no, that's pretty much it. I think we covered it. No, he's been over 30 points the last 2 games, and then 3 times this year he's been over.
Yeah, I mean he's averaging 30
8.
DK points a game. He has scored fewer. He hasn't scored fewer than 20 fantasy points in any game, and the worst game came against Jacksonville, which I think we all kind of were expecting that. He still threw for 300 passing yards in that game. In fact, aside from week 1, where he didn't need to throw all that much, only 27 attempts, he's thrown for 300 yards in every single game. And something that really stands out to me, the first couple of weeks, he only attempted 27 and 28 passes. Since then, he hasn't attempted fewer than 36 passes in any single game. So they're letting him sling it, man. I mean, he's someone that, to me, is always going to be in play because of his potential, his upside, his ability to just pretty much shred any defense apart. But this is probably not a week where I'm going to pay up for quarterback. If I do, because there is plenty of value, I definitely will pay up. I'll pay all the way up for Mahomes this week. I just think he's that talented. Any final thoughts here, man, before the next game?
No, that's it. We covered.
All right, this is another one that might be pretty popular this weekend. You got Steelers taking on the Browns in Pittsburgh. This game has a 49 over-under. It's gone down 1.5 points since it opened. 71% of the bets are on the under here. Pretty surprising to me. The Steelers have an implied team total of 28.5 points, while the Browns have a 20.5 implied team total. Steelers are 8-point favorites here. Give me your thoughts on this game, Bobby.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting because you have the Steelers defense. It's going to be pretty chalky at 2,400, but then you get a guy like Baker Mayfield who could kind of turn that whole situation around. Given the fact that he's just pretty good, he's not your average rookie, but usually when you have a team that's an 8-point favorite with their defense at home at 2,300 going up against a rookie quarterback, in cash you play them, in tournaments you play them. So it's going to be an interesting situation come Sunday. Also, Cleveland's defense has been pretty good against opposing quarterbacks. Obviously, Ben Roethlisberger's home road splits are very drastic. A lot better quarterback at home. I think Antonio Brown's going to get back going this week. Like him a lot. Like Juju and like Connor. Like basically 3 Pittsburgh guys that you can kind of depend on in this offense. And Vance McDonald's interesting too at 3,700 as a tight end option, just with how Cleveland kind of defends tight ends in general. They leave a safety up high, so they always have like a good portion of the field to throw to. Quarterbacks always have a good portion of the field to throw to their tight ends versus Cleveland. So I like Vance at that price tag as well.
Yeah, I like this entire offense, man. I'm right on board with you here. I think James Conner is probably my favorite play on the Steelers side. Again, another running back who I think is in a good position. Pretty high price here, or one of the most expensive ones of the week. So the Browns have been a little bit more susceptible to the run recently than they were at the beginning of the year. So I really think this is a good spot for James Conner. He hasn't been Mr. Consistent by any means. He's had some subpar games, but the last couple of weeks, he's really been turning it on, man. Over 100 rushing yards in each of his last 2 games. Still very involved in the passing game this season. 35 targets in 6 games, nearly 6 targets per game, basically averaging. Has come down with 26 catches. Someone that I think is very talented. Obviously, he's not Le'Veon Bell, but it's clear. It's pretty clear that this is a good offensive line here, opening holes for the running back for Pittsburgh. So I think Connor's in a really good spot here. Like him quite a bit. I agree with you, man. Baker Mayfield is interesting. I expected him to smash last week. He really, really struggled against the Bucs. I was actually, following that game quite a bit because I was invested in Mayfield, and it was just frustrating, man. It really was frustrating to see kind of how he played, and I was able to rewatch that game, and I really don't know. This could be another week where this is another week where I think he's in a good position. The Steelers are allowing the 4th, or actually it's not to the quarterback position. They're allowing pretty good numbers to the quarterback position this season. I do agree, though. This is a game where he can also struggle. It's you're going to get, I think, one extreme, either a good game or a bad game. I don't think you're going to get something in the middle for him. But I do think that the game environment does favor him. I'm probably not going back to the well this week, but I do think he is interesting without a doubt. Any interest in Nick Chubb? There was a lot of buzz about him. We talked about it. Just fade him in tournaments last week. I know playing him in cash. I don't know if it bit you or not, but I still think it was the right play to play him in cash. He didn't have a terrible game, but I think it was the perfect type of game. You played him in cash. He got 80 yards and a touchdown, 14 points. That was perfect for his price tag at 3,600. But the upside and the ceiling game that he could have had wasn't there for him. So I do think we made the right choice last week. Are you making that same choice this week? He's still cheap. He's going to receive a lot of the carries here. I just don't think this is a game script that kind of plays into his favor.
Yeah, I think with all the running back options, I think we can kind of go away from Chubb. I actually did end up rostering him in cash last week, so it worked out. Probably owe you for that one because I was kind of on the fence and I was kind of leaning the other way, and I kind of just was like Armando liked him, so I feel like at the end when it came down to it, I felt like you had to play him in cash last week just for the price and the situation that he was in. Yeah, but I think, like you said, I think he's a good fade
this
week.
All-around fade in every format.
Yeah.
Any pass catchers here? Jarvis Landry, David Njoku for this offense that kind of stands out to you? I mean, I'm never gonna talk anyone out of Landry. 15 targets last week, 97 yards, a touchdown. This is a good matchup. He had a big game against his team in week 1, 7 catches for 106 yards. I know the quarterback was different, but I don't think that's going to really matter this week. I think he's still going to see a bunch of targets. I think they're going to be chasing points here. And this is a good matchup. This is a good matchup. Steelers have really struggled against the wide receiver position, like I mentioned a minute ago when I was talking about before. They've allowed the 4th most DraftKings fantasy points per game to wideouts this year. So I do think, Landry could come in here and have a nice game. I don't know how popular he's going to be. I can actually look at that now, but he's not standing out as one of the higher owned guys of the week by any means. So give me your thoughts here on someone like Landry, who is projected to be 2 to 4%.
I like Landry.
Landry, who's projected to be 2 to 4% owned here.
Yeah, no, I like Landry if he's at that ownership, especially going against Pittsburgh. They play like a zone deep, so you can see him sit down in the slot. And like you said, the targets have been there. So I think he's the type of receiver that can really do damage to Pittsburgh. So, yeah, I would definitely look at him at that ownership percentage. And I feel like it's a good matchup for him overall.
And another guy I'm interested in is David Njoku, man. 4,600 here. I also think a good game environment for him. We've seen him really, turn the corner since Baker Mayfield has become the starting quarterback for this team. Double-digit fantasy points in each of those games. He's now scored in consecutive games in consecutive weeks here. 7, 10, 12, 6 targets in his last 4 games. I just think he's trending in the right direction. I think this is a really good matchup here for him. The Steelers are actually surrendering the 2nd most fantasy points per game to tight ends this season, man.
Yeah, I have Njoku as the number 1 tight end on my board, which is just kind of contradictory towards like the fact that I want to use the Steelers D in cash. So trying to figure that out. I think he's in a really good spot. I like Cleveland's offense. It's going to be interesting to see how highly owned the Pittsburgh Steelers defense are in tournaments because Cleveland could make for a good leverage play.
And that's kind of what I was going to allude to now, man, because I have the Steelers defense ranked I actually projected to be the highest owned by a good amount.
Yeah,
by a good
like
amount. 26 to 30% is what I have him here, and that's on Fantasy Labs. And I know Adam Levitan is the one that runs these projections, and he's pretty sharp at this, man. I trust these projections pretty. I pretty much, with all my research, is what I use for as far as ownership projections. I don't use any other site, and I think he's pretty spot on. I do think they're going to be pretty popular. Kind of like playing some of these Browns offensive players for leverage. I do think that makes for a lot of sense here.
No, I think you're right. Labs is probably the best in terms of ownership that you can get for sites. Yeah, I like what you're saying with the Browns in tournaments. I would still play the Steelers in cash games, but as a fade, and I would probably look to fade them in tournaments, or not necessarily full fade, but just be under the field because they're almost 30%. So it's like you're probably gonna have to make a decision there in tournaments. And I would just kind of lean towards just being underweight, I feel like, because the Browns' offense is in a good spot, and they look like a good leverage play, especially at the price tags for all these guys as well. So,
yeah,
especially Mayfield and Njoku stacks.
I agree with that, man. I totally agree with that. Any final thoughts in this contest? I think we broke this one down pretty good. I think we're right now. Which is good. So far, we've started off 2 for 2 as far as agreeing on these games, man. So it looks like it might be a smooth week for both of us here. It's going to be easy roster constructions, man, because sometimes I talk you into someone and you talk me into someone. It's just, it makes it we have to start changing and tweaking our lineups, but it's good, man. It's always fun. I enjoy doing this with you every week, man. So let's move on to this next game here. I don't have much interest in this, and that's the Redskins at New York playing the Giants. A 42.5 over under here. 20.75 implied team total for the Redskins, and a 21.75 implied team total for the Giants, who are 1-point home favorites here. I'm going to come right out and say, man, I completely dudded on Eli Manning this season, man. I thought he was going to have a better year because of all the weapons he surrounded himself with. He just doesn't look good, man. I know he had a pretty solid game last week against Atlanta, threw for 399 yards and a touchdown, but still didn't look good. I was watching that game. He just didn't look good, didn't look comfortable there. And a lot of that, I think, came from a 58-yard bomb towards the end of the game. So take that for what it's worth. This is just a game I'm staying away from completely. I'm never going to fault anyone for playing Saquon Barkley. He's just been Mr. Consistent, 22 targets in the last 2 games. Very involved in the passing game. Is a beast of a runner, man. I mean, I enjoy watching this guy run. He is just so powerful. He's a special running back, man. So I'm never going to talk anyone out of him and off of him, I guess. But I'm not going to go there this week. Any thoughts here for either of these two teams? Anything I'm missing?
No, it's interesting you said that you weren't going to chase Saquon this week because I don't know what his ownership's at, but I'm kind of leaning towards fading him just with all the running back options that we have. He's right in between Gurley and Hunt, but maybe that might be a reason to play him. Because obviously people are going to want to pay up for Gurley and people are going to play Hunt. So in tournaments, like maybe it's Saquon's probably a good play. I'm just don't know if I'm going to go there as of right now. I think Odell, obviously, Josh Norman really doesn't follow, so I wouldn't hate playing them. I've played Eli the last week. I rostered him on the primetime slate. One week I played him, 1 week I didn't play him. I would obviously not. I would kind of not play. I wouldn't play him this week. I think there's better value. Yeah, I don't. That's pretty much all I got. I didn't really give this game nothing's really
Yeah, it's just
appealing to
nothing
me,
pops out. I agree
say.
with you, man. Nothing really pops out. Nothing stands out because
But I wonder if that's a mistake.
I don't think so,
though.
man. I mean, look, Vegas has this as a pretty low over under here. Both teams have, I mean, average at best implied team totals. I know 70% of the bets are on the over. If I see any major line shifts, then I consider that. But I respect these two defenses a little bit. It sounds silly, but the Redskins haven't been too bad defensively. The Giants, they have some pretty solid weapons on defense. So they're not terrible. Neither of these two defenses are completely terrible where you want to go ahead and attack them. I know Jordan Reed is obviously in a good spot because the Giants have struggled against tight ends. Last season they did. This year they're playing a little bit better, but they still have that, that vulnerability there, I think. But Reed hasn't done much. So it's really tough to trust him, and why start now? There's so many other better spots to attack and better spots to kind of exploit. Then this doesn't make any sense to go here. Again, like you said, I'm not going to talk anyone off of Barkley. I'm not going to talk anyone off of someone like Odell Beckham, but they're not core plays for us. At least not for me. It just doesn't feel right paying up that much.
It doesn't feel right, though. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, Labs has Odell at 9 to 12% and Saquon at 5 to 8% ownership.
But at 8,800, I mean, you need how many? Okay, so his obviously his ceiling is we saw a 40-point ceiling from him, but the pretty much the likelihood is 20 to 25, 26 fantasy points. I think you can get that from Kareem Hunt. I think you get that from James Conner at much cheaper prices. Like that's kind of why I wouldn't want to pay up for Barkley here. I get the entire situation that he's going to be far less owned than these guys, but I don't know, man. I think
well, that's my thought process too. Is like I'd rather roster Kareem Hunt or Connor, but you're just looking at like Saquon. Both Saquon and Odell both have the potential to be the highest scoring players at their respective positions come the end of Sunday. Yeah. They're probably not both going to do it, but one of the two. So it could make for a good tournament leverage play at this ownership that they're kind of at, that we're looking at them at now. So I don't know. I just wouldn't like write off the play completely. I'd keep it in mind and just try to figure if you like one or two of them and which one you like in tournaments and kind of go from there. If you want to include them in your builds.
Yeah. Anything else? Because I mean, I think we're both pretty down on this game. I don't think there's a ton of interest. I think obviously you can go here for tournament upside.
No, we can.
But that's about it, I think. All right, on to this next game, Seattle at Detroit. This game has a 49.5 over/under. The Lions have a 26.25 implied team total. The Seahawks have a 23.5 implied team total here. Theo Reddick looks like he's questionable for this game. He hasn't been able to practice much this week, actually at all. Aside from that, I don't think there's much injury news that we got to worry about here. Give me your thoughts on this game, Bobby, because I think there are some interesting plays, but no core plays for me out of this game here.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not really big on the Seattle-Detroit game. Russell Wilson seems like he's all right. But, like, they just want to run the football, so I'm not really on that too much. Golden Tate got a little revenge narrative. He would seem like the best play in this game, I would say. He would be the guy in term that I would roster. I think he's good for cash games if you want to go there. But he's the only one, and I don't think I'd go there in cash, but he's the only guy I could kind of make a case for. Chris Carson, but there's just good running back. There's too many good running back, higher end running backs.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there, man. I mean, I think Chris Carson's in a good spot. The Lions do struggle against the run here. He's reasonably priced, but It's just the other options in this price range that I kind of feel a little bit more comfortable with. I feel like they might be in just a little bit better of a situation, not necessarily matchup, just a better situation than Carson is. Kerryon Johnson's coming off a huge game, 19 rush attempts for 158 yards. But a lot of that came on a 71-yard run. And this was also against a very poor Miami run defense. This week, Seattle's defense is not as bad as Miami. So I do think that this is not as easy of a matchup for him. His price has gone up. I think there might be some people chasing those points that we saw last week. So his ownership might be a little bit inflated for me this week. And again, we've already alluded to how many cheap running backs there is this week. We already talked about Lindsay in the same price range, which I like far more than I do Kerryon Johnson this week. I do think Johnson's very talented. I like him as a running back. I think he is by far the best running back on this team. It's about time that they're actually letting him go and run here. So I do like him for the season, just not this week as much as some of the other guys in this range. I agree with you. I think Golden Tate's interesting. He does have a pretty good matchup here against Justin Coleman. 18% advantage rating against, according to Pro Football Focus. Kenny Golladay also has a pretty good matchup here. Shaquille Griffin, 24% advantage rating on. The thing is just the targets have not been as high consistent as we like to see. 4 in week 4, then 9 in week 5, then 2 last week. Very up and down here. I think super talented young receiver. Problem is just we cannot project. I don't think there's a safe projection. I think that the range is pretty wide, making him a very volatile play here. I do think he can have a big game, and he did have a touchdown called back, if I'm not mistaken, last week. But still, 5,700, there's upside to be had there. So if you're trying to get some upside in this price range at the receiver position, I think you could definitely go Golladay. Aside from that, though, I just really not much else here for me. Again, no core plays, just kind of secondary plays, guys that I might, shuffle in my lineups if I'm creating enough lineups to fit these guys in. Any other takes here for you? None of the quarterbacks are on play for me here.
No, I'm pretty much going to stay away from Seattle and Detroit, I think, this week.
All right, on to a game that I think we both are going to be pretty interested in this week, and that is the Bucs heading over to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals. 54.5 over-under. It's actually jumped up a point since it opened. The Bengals have a 29.25 implied team total. The Bucs have a 25.25 implied team total. It's something interesting here because the Bucs implied team total jumped close to 2 points already since it opened. They are only 4-point dogs on the road here. Give me your thoughts on this game because I do think this is going to be one that garners a ton of ownership this weekend.
Yeah, I really like AJ Green in this game. I don't think, how could you not? If you've seen how they utilized him last week, he's just the majority of the offense right now. Mixon's really good as well. I think he'll be definitely highly owned and one of the better running backs of the league. Another higher end running back in a good spot. My thing with Mixon is it seems like he has no vision. He just runs right into the line, and I faded him last week on the primetime slate, and it kind of worked out. I don't know if I'm going to fade him again this week, but I think he's always a good fade candidate. I think there's a little more hype than there is actually how good of a player he is, but he does get a ton. He's all the usage basically, so I understand why people want to roster him. He has all the usage in that backfield, but yeah, the guy I want from the Bengals is AJ Green. And Uzoma's at a great price at 3,500. He got in the end zone last week. Going to play 89% of the snaps. He's always I think I like Uzoma as well.
Really strong play here. This is a really bad Bucs defense. They really, really struggle against opposing tight ends, allowing the most fantasy points per game to the position. In addition to that, they've allowed the second most receiving yards, the second most touchdowns, and the fourth most receptions to the tight end position this season. So it's a really good spot for him. Like you mentioned, he's going to be on the field for the majority of the game here because you got obviously Eifert is on IR, Croft is injured, so they're very thin at the tight end position, forcing Uzoma to be on the field. I do like him quite a bit. I think point per dollar wise, he might be the strongest tight end play of the week here. I'm with you, man. I think AJ Green is such a good play this week. I think this is just a smash spot for him. He's expected to see Carlton Davis, where he has a 35% advantage rating according to Pro Football Focus here. He accounts for 27% of the target share for this Bengals offense, leading the team. Right behind them, too, is Tyler Boyd, man. I like him quite a bit here, too. MJ Stewart's going to be covering him. Boyd has a 27% advantage rating. And Boyd is quietly accounted for 22% of the target share here for the Bengals. So both of these guys pretty much taking over the 50% of the target share. I think both are firmly in play. And I think Dalton's firmly in play here, man. I really like Dalton quite a bit this week. 6,200, a bit pricey for him. He's coming off a terrible performance at Kansas City. I think this is a good get-right spot for him. We haven't seen him have a really big game since week 4 at Atlanta, but I do think this is a good spot for him to get things going. I don't mind this stack at all. I think this is probably going to be one of the top stacks, and rightfully so. On the other side, Winston actually looks good, man. 365 yards last week, 395 yards the week before, at least 26 DraftKings points in each of his 2 starts this season. I think this is going to be a shootout, so I expect him to just chuck the ball here. This defense is so bad. He's thrown at least 41 passes in each of his first 2 starts, so I like him here quite a bit. And of course, I'd be pairing him up with Mike Evans. Not the best of matchups for Evans, but I still do think that he has plenty of upside here. He does have an 18% advantage rating. But I do respect Drake Kirkpatrick quite a bit. I do think he's a pretty talented corner here. But again, the volume is going to be there for Evans, so I do think he's in a good spot. Any thoughts here on this side of the ball?
Evans just kills Tampa Bay.
Trust me, I'm more hesitant to play him than I am anyone else on the opposite side, of course. Which is why I said, I don't mind him. I do respect the defensive player here for the Bengals. I do think it's a pretty tough matchup. But again, he does have an 18% advantage rating on, and I do think that they could be chasing points here. It's an interesting game to me, without a doubt. I'm just far more bullish on the Bengals side, though, than I am on the Bucs. But I don't mind a Winston, Mike Evans stack whatsoever. Any other receiver here for the Bucs that stands out at you? Whether it be Godwin, Deshaun Jackson, any of the tight ends, and anyone here popping out at you?
I'd probably lean Godwin. Then he'll probably throw it to Djax. So that's the risk I'm not willing to take, and I'm just going to kind of pick my receivers from a different game. In this situation, I struggle with Jameis and trying to figure out who he's going to throw to. 2 tight ends, 5 different receivers. Humphreys is like the guy he really likes. Whenever he decides to like Humphreys, it's like, oh baby,
And I don't mind playing a naked Jameis here. I do think there's some merit in doing that because he also rushes. Last week he rushed 10 times for 55 yards, man. So definitely something he's very capable of doing, using his legs, that is. So I wouldn't mind just playing, Winston with none of his pass catchers and, running it back with some of these, Bengals receivers here. I think that could be kind of like a unique way to build a roster. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think that's fine. I think that's probably the best way to roster Jameis, to be perfectly honest, because I don't know. It gets tough week by week trying to figure out who he's going to throw to, and he's never going to throw to Mike Evans consistently for whatever reason. So,
yeah, he only threw to him 5 times against Atlanta, and then 11 times last week. So I guess like you said, it might be just difficult. They do spread it here. There's so many options.
only 5 times.
So I am less bullish on Mixon than you are. I do think he's going to be somewhat chalky this week, and he's probably chalk I'm willing to fade. I kind of respect the.
I'm with you. I think Mixon's fade.
Yeah.
I think Mixon's fadeable chalk. I just said I faded him last week. Like I said, I don't. He's a guy I'm looking to fade every week if he's highly owned.
Yeah. Any final thoughts here before we move on to the next game? Because my and not sure yet, but right now probably the quarterback I'm most bullish on this week is coming out of this next game here. If you're ready to move on, we can just jump right into it. So you got the Jets visiting Chicago to take on the Bears. This game has a 44.5 over-under. The Bears have a 26 implied team total. The Jets have an 18.5 implied team total. Can I interest you in any Mitchell Trubisky here? I mean, I watch him play, man, and every time he goes back to throw the ball, it makes me a little nervous, So if I roster him, I'm probably not going to watch the game. I was on air today with Bob and Mike Dempsey and on SiriusXM, and I kind of just let them know the same thing. Like, I have him pretty high in my season-long rankings, and I like him again this week, man. He's just been doing it for fantasy. Over 300 passing yards in each of his last 3 games, over 30 DraftKings points in each of the last 3 games. He's taking on a Jets defense that is dealing with a bunch of injuries to the secondary and have just been completely tortured by the quarterback position this season. Talk to me, man. It's tough for me not to play him this week. Am I nuts here?
Yeah, last week I played a ton of Trubisky. It was probably my best play of the week. Everywhere else, I kind of think in the Millie Maker I had 50% Trubisky, but I didn't have the.
You didn't have the pieces to the puzzle.
I would say.
You had one though. You had one piece. Because he did go off. Puzzle. I hope
you had one. I don't hate the Trubisky.
I hope you paired him up.
Guy likes to run.
I hope you paired him up with Tariq Cohen, man. We talked about him on the show, and he had a big game.
Yeah, no, we did. I paired him up in some lineups with Tariq, but my guy that I mainly paired him up with, which the majority of people who rostered him paired him up with, was Taylor Gabriel. Kind of sank my lineups. But I like Taylor Gabriel this week as a game theory play because I think 22% of the field had him last week, and he completely airmailed everything. So I think that you can kind of go back to Trubisky and his pass catchers this week as a strong game theory play. Burned everyone last week. Maybe they'll come back this week. And obviously Trubisky has the high floor. Yeah, I like the call for tournaments. Definitely.
I like him quite a bit. I'm sorry? What?
We'll go on there. Even cash games Trubisky if you feel comfortable going there.
I'm still hesitant to use him in cash, to be honest with you. But that doesn't mean, especially when there are other quarterbacks in that price range, just, in better spots, man, and probably safer floors. I'd rather just play Jared Goff at $100 less in cash against Green Bay than I would feel Trubisky here. So, but in tournaments, I do think he's a strong play. I don't mind going back here to Tariq Cohen. He's just been so involved in the passing game. 8, 9, 13 targets in the last 3 games, 2 receiving touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown as well. Just been playing really, really good. We talked about this last game. I think a lot has to do with them playing slow tight ends. But I for now, I'm going to continue to ride the hot hand here with Tariq Cohen until I see him fall back. However, that said, I do think based on what we've talked about all show long about the value of that running back, it's going to be tough to fit him in roster construction wise. I do think he's a good play. He's not a core play of mine though. because of that. Because I just feel like there's either cheaper value that I like in good spots, or just to pay up maybe for 1,200 more. I got someone like Kareem Hunt, and I feel that this is a week I can come up with those 1,200. So my ownership and my exposure to Cohen is probably going to be limited, but I do think this is a good spot for him. I think he's going to continue rolling here. Would you agree with that take? Is that something that you feel the same, or are you going to have a little bit more exposure than me? Probably.
No, I liked Cohen. He hasn't really made my player pool this week. I really didn't even give Trubisky that much thought again, but like I said, I think that it makes sense. Like, you bringing him up to me kind of like makes me think about playing him. Yeah, if I was to stack him with anyone, though, I'd probably go back to Gabriel, where he burned everyone last week. The Jets' secondary is questionable. Trubisky should be able to throw a lot more this week. They're at home,
they're
right?
at home.
They're on the road?
Yeah, they're at home here. Yeah.
They're at home, yeah. So I think the Patriots probably gave him a bunch of different looks that probably confused him. I thought he was going to have a good week anyways last week throwing the football. I knew he was going to run a little. He seemed hesitant to throw. Maybe he won't be as hesitant versus the Jets. Todd Bowles is a pretty good defensive mind, though, the Jets head coach. So that's something to consider. But I think he might have more success throwing the football versus the Jets.
Yeah, I think so. And for what it's worth, guys, the Jets have allowed 40 receptions this year to running backs, pretty decent amount there. If I'm pairing up Trubisky with anyone, it's going to be Trey Burton. The Jets have struggled somewhat to keep tight ends out of the end zone this year, allowing 3 touch position, which is tied for third most here in the league. So I do think this is a decent spot. For Burton, he has scored in 3 consecutive games. Has been pretty much 11, coming off an 11 target game, 126 yards. Allen Robinson is still dinged up. From my understanding, he didn't practice today. He played last week, but he was obviously not efficient. He might just be out there as a decoy again this week, I think. Only saw 5 targets last week, Allen Robinson. So I do think guys like Taylor.
Was he a decoy, though, or was it Stephon Gilmore?
I want to say. I want to say decoy. I want to say he wasn't 100%, but I do think Gilmore has turned up to be one of the best corners in the league this year. Without a doubt. Not discrediting Gilmore at all. I do think that the injury, though, did cause some of that. I don't think he would have had a huge game anyways, but I do think he would have been a little bit more efficient. I do respect Jeffrey as a receiver here. Robinson as a receiver here quite a bit. So,
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I did. I know. It's Allen Robinson. I was actually, just messed up there, man, and my bad for that. But yeah, I just don't know, man. I think, his injury, he hasn't been a high volume receiver like I would like to see to trust him this week here. So, and like I said, he's not 100%. So I do think Taylor Gabriel and Trey Burton are interesting. I'm probably going to be pairing up Trubisky with someone like Trey Burton in my Trubisky stacks this week. Are you going back to someone like Jermaine Kearse? I know he let a lot of people down last week. Is this a spot where you think you're going to go back to the wall? I wasn't too bullish on him last week. I did have some interest, but I didn't have any exposure to him. So I didn't get, I didn't suffer like some of the people that rostered him, but I do think he was a good play. I don't think he's a good play this week, though.
Yeah, I didn't play Jermaine Kearse too much last week. I had a couple of shares of him, but my guy was Chris Hogan, so it was a fade of Jermaine Kearse, and it worked out, thank God.
My guy was sneaking.
Yeah, I don't know.
Out, so.
What's Snead finish?
Garbage. I think less than 10 fantasy points. Not 100% sure the exact number.
So you played Hogan like I said.
I'm sorry?
You should have played Hogan,
You're right.
like I
You're
said.
right. Snead did have 7 targets, only came down with 3 of those. So the volume was there, man. He just wasn't that efficient.
No, Snead was the. A lot of really sharp players played Snead last week, so I don't fault you at all. In the case of Kearse,
I'm not going back there, man. I wasn't there. I wasn't that high on him last week. I just don't think, for those who, got bit and might want to go back, I just don't think it's necessary this week. I'd much rather play someone like Demaryius Thomas for a couple hundred more with so much more upside, in my opinion. There you go. Bless you, bro. Bless you.
Thank you.
I think that's an approval. That's a Demaryius Thomas approval right there, guys. So you heard the sneeze. That means go ahead and roster Demaryius Thomas in tournaments.
49.
Any final thoughts on this Jets game? I'm just, I can't roster any Jet, to be honest with you. I just cannot do it.
I thank you for bringing Trubisky to my attention. Robbie Anderson.
Yeah.
High ankle sprain. Just to let people
he did
know.
Practice today. He might not play. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna retract here for a second. I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna roster this player, but I do want to point him out. Chris Herndon, 7 targets last week. He's now scored in each of the last 2 games. He's only 2,800. So if you're dumpster diving here at the tight end position, we already talked about Njoku that we like. You mentioned Travis Kelce. I mentioned Trey Burton. You also mentioned Vance McDonald. We talked about Uzoma. There's a lot of options at tight end. However, you're dumpster diving here at 2,800. I think Herndon is pretty interesting. I'm not going to be rostering, but I just wanted to mention him because I do think that it's something that we should be pointing out. The Bears have allowed 4 touchdowns to tight ends this season, tied for second most in the league, which is also worth noting. But I'm not going to be making him a staple in my lineups. I'm probably going to have zero to little exposure depending on how much volume I put in this weekend. Do you agree with that? Is he not even on your radar whatsoever?
No, I'm happy you mentioned him because I was checking him out earlier. Like you said, the numbers are really good last couple of weeks. And it's kind of like where you would attack the Bears, I feel like. Middle of the field, I would say. So I don't hate the play. Just there's so much, it's the same thing with running backs this week. It's there's so much good plays. I don't know if he's going to make the cut.
Yeah. I agree with that. Bears defense is in a smash spot. The problem is I'm not going to pay $4,100 for a defense this week. So feel free to do so if you feel comfortable with it. They're in a great spot, but I just don't find the need to do so this week. Give me any final thoughts you have here before we move on to the next game.
Let's get a move
Baltimore at Carolina. This game, Cam Newton is dealing with, some type of shoulder injury apparently, but according to Coach Ron Rivera here, he is not going to miss this game. Definitely something to keep an eye on, if you ask me here. But for now, it doesn't appear that Cam Newton is in danger to miss this game. This does have a 44 over/under. The Ravens are 2-point road favorites with a 23 implied team total, and the Panthers have a 21 implied team total here, Bobby. 51% of the bets are on the over. 54% of the bets are taking the points with the Panthers. I think that's pretty interesting betting. Give me your thoughts on this game. This is one that I feel I should have a little bit more interest in, but I don't, man. I really don't. I think there are some solid plays, but nothing that is really popping out of me. Talk some sense into me, bro.
Yeah, I like the price tags of the Ravens receivers with Crabtree. I think he's at 4,800.
Yeah.
And he's not really being talked about much this week at all. Didn't have a great game last week, but Flacco's definitely showed situationally that he really trusts Crabtree. And at that price tag, he's just too cheap. John Brown, like as we saw last week, is probably coming into his own as one of the better receivers in the NFL. So he's never going to be a bad play, and he's just a tad under 600. I think he's at 5,900. So I'm not 100%
Yeah, he's 5,900.
that,
Just continues to smash. Yeah. Just continues.
Yeah. He's a beast. High variance guy, good for tournaments. Thing is, you want to roster Flacco if you're going to roster these two receivers, and I feel like they're more one-offs than actually rostering Flacco. Also, like the Ravens' defense going up versus Cam. Cam's always usually turnover prone.
And this offensive line has some issues too.
I just lost defense versus Carolina because of Cam. So I'm going to continue to do that, and they'll probably make my player pool.
They actually pretty much my top defense. I think there's a lot of defenses in bad situations this week, but the Ravens to me are just an elite defense when you look at personnel-wise. This is a Panthers offense that does have issues with the offensive line. They haven't really been that good at protecting the quarterback here. I do think this is a good matchup for the Ravens. I agree with you. I think that's probably my favorite play. I love the Crabtree call, man. I just do. He is, he hasn't had that many ceiling games this year, but he's been pretty consistent, as far as, especially when you're looking at his price tag. He's only 4,800. He leads the team in targets here since week one, at least 8 targets in every game, 21% of the target share here. He's actually 12th in the league in air yards. So it is worth noting that the opportunity is certainly there. It's only a matter of time before he starts putting in some big games here. This could very well be one we saw in week 6. He had 6 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown, 21 DK points. He could certainly have that kind of performance here in this spot against the Panthers. He's expected to see James Bradbury, according to Pro Football Focus here, a 6% advantage rating in the matchup. So I like him quite a bit. Again, another value play here. It seems like there's so much value everywhere. So I think he's fine. If you're looking at some of the players in this or receivers in this price range, I probably would say he stands out the most here for me. Well over Demaryius Thomas, of course. I just feel like there's a safer floor and maybe as much upside at this point of their career. So I like him quite a bit. I don't think I'm going to go to, John Brown. He's someone that I've been writing a lot about. I wrote about him last week and I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And for me, it's just situational. And this is not a matchup I feel totally excited about for him. I don't think this is a game environment either that really does favor him. Any interest in McCaffrey? I know we both like the Ravens defense, which is probably that's gonna answer my question here. But I think he's always in play, man. I really do. I think a talent like McCaffrey and the usage that he has is always gonna put him on the page for a player to consider. This is just not a week I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of interest in McCaffrey this week either. I got him ranked pretty low. It's heavy on Kamara last week in a similar situation. So I've learned my lesson with Scott backs versus the Ravens. I'm not going to test that again.
Any final thoughts here? Any other players that stand out for you? I'm pretty much not that bullish on this game. I think I'll probably be playing some Crabtree this week. I do think he's going to be somewhat popular. I know you said you haven't heard much, but I think here in the projections, he is 9 to 12%, not that bad. But still, I was hoping he would be closer to that 5 to 8% range, and maybe they'll make some adjustments over at Fantasy Labs there. But for right now, it looks like he's 9 to 12% projected ownership here. Any final thoughts for this game before we move on to the next?
No, I think we covered it.
Colts are heading to the West Coast to take on the Raiders. This game has a 50.5 implied over-under here. The Colts have a 26.75 implied team total. The Raiders have a 23.75 implied team total. The game has some interesting value here at the running back position, especially for the Raiders side. Doug Martin's expected to get the early down work here for the Raiders. He's just been so bad that I'm not even going to, consider or play around with the idea of rostering him. However, someone like a Jalen Richard, I do have plenty of interest in. He has a pretty solidified role in this passing game. The Colts have allowed 49 receptions to opposing backs, which is tied for second most this year. And Richard is surprisingly second on the team in target share behind Jared Cook, the tight end. I do think this is also going to be a game script that does favor Richard here because according to Vegas, the Colts are road favorites here. I do agree with them. I think this Raiders team is in tank mode. I think they're pretty bad. So I do think Andrew Luck and company could come here and score some points. Break down this Raiders side, this running back situation here for me, and give me your thoughts on both sides of the ball here.
Yeah, so I like Jalen Richard and on DraftKings. I think he'll make for a good play going forward. The Amari Cooper trade's interesting. Jordy Nelson is going to take over as the number one receiver for the Oakland Raiders. He's basically ran all the roles in the offense this season from the slot to the outside. So I think he's going to be pretty heavily targeted. Carr seems to like him. He had a touchdown in 3 straight games earlier on in the year. And I just think that a lot of the usage that Amari Cooper used to get is going to be shift over to Jordy. And Jared Cook for that, and Jared Cook as well. So those are two guys that I'd be looking to roster at their prices. I'd lean more Jordy in cash games and Cook maybe in tournaments. That's kind of how I'd go this week for the Raiders side.
Yeah, and do you have any interest on the other side, on someone like T.Y. Hilton?
Oh, T.Y.'s I think is probably I think he's the best receiver play on the slate for his point per
dollar. I think that's a too cheap of a price, and that's why I bring him up because I do think that's way too cheap of a price here for him.
Especially if Luck's going to throw 50 times again, which is a possibility because they can't.
Yeah.
T.Y.'s cash game lock, I feel like.
We're not going to see what we saw last week from Andrew Luck where he only had to throw 23 times. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Prior to last week, guys, It was 43 in week 6, 59 in week 5, 62 in week 3, 40 in week 62 in week 4, 40 in week 3, 31 in week 2, 53 in week 1. And these are pass attempts. So he's slinging it. They're I know last week Mac was running the ball, but this is not a situation where I think they're going to be relying on the run game. I think they're going to let Andrew Luck sling here in a good spot for him. It's really a good spot. The Raiders are a defense that does struggle here against the pass, so I do like him quite a bit. I think Andrew Luck is actually an interesting play. I am concerned that they're traveling to the West Coast, Bobby. We've had those concerns before. I don't think it's as drastic as a quarterback traveling from the West to the East because the time change will favor Luck in this spot, but still some traveling here. I still like Luck. I think he's in a good spot. I think he has a pretty decent floor, and there's some upside. I think he'll be overlooked here in a good spot. I actually like the idea of pairing him and T.Y. Hilton up this weekend and running it back with someone like a Jalen Richard.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good call, especially in terms of just not taking Jordy Nelson and kind of going the route of Jalen Richard. I like that
play. Eric Ebrahim's obviously always in consideration. 7 targets last week. He didn't really do much with those 7 targets. I just think there are, and we've talked about them already, I think there are so many other great plays at this position that there's really no need to go there this week. I much rather, play if I'm trying to attack this Oakland Raider defense. I much rather play someone like Hilton here. Any interest for you in Derek Carr, or is he just not someone you're going to be?
I think Derek Carr was at the beginning of the week someone you got to consider in cash just because of the price and just the potential game script.
Yeah.
I'm going in a different direction.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think we broke this one down pretty good here, Bobby. I'm ready to move on to the next one if you are. The Niners are headed to Arizona to take on the Cardinals. A 42.5 over-under here. A 21.75 implied team total for the Niners. A 20.75 implied team total for the Cardinals. A game where I don't have a ton. However, we talked about this at the beginning of the show here, and Raheem Mostert is in a good spot, man, and he could get some work here with Matt Breida dealing with an injury, with an ankle injury that he hasn't been able to practice with. The Cardinals are arguably the worst run defense in the league right now, really, really struggling against the running back position. Talk to me here about this matchup for this offense.
Yeah, I like Mostert a lot. If he gets the start, or even if he's not getting the start, I think he's very, very a very good play, especially in tournaments. The Cardinals offense, a lot of question marks for me. I just don't. Do I want to roster DJ? Is he going to be consistent? The price is fantastic. It's just a matter of. I was going to ask you more what you wanted to do with DJ.
Man, it's really tough, man. I mean, this is a good matchup for him. He had a pretty nice game against this defense. But again, he's just so touchdown dependent. And when you have him at 6,700 and you have someone like Kareem Hunt at 7K or 7,100, I mean, how are you going to justify, and Kareem Hunt is playing Denver, which is as bad, if not, equally bad, in just a better offense, in a better situation. How are you going to justify playing David Johnson over him? I get the ownership's, point of view from it, but there's some players you're going to have to roster that are chalky, and Kareem Hunt is one of those guys. So if you're playing the afternoon slate, I definitely think Johnson's going to be someone you pretty much plug and play, but in the main slate, it's very difficult to fit him in when we've already talked about some of these other backs. We haven't even gotten to Todd Gurley yet. James Conner's in a good spot. Kareem Hunt's in a good spot. Lindsay, in my opinion, is in a good spot, much cheaper here. So it's just difficult to justify him. He'll definitely make my player pool, but it's not someone I'm going to be completely overweight on this week, I think. I actually like a receiver in this game for the for the Cardinals. Christian Kirk, man, he's been pretty efficient since Josh Rosen became the quarterback here. I think he has that big playability. We've seen the Niners been vulnerable here against wide receivers. He had his best game this season or in his career already. Against this same defense, I do expect, the upsides there. I can certainly see him have another big touchdown catch here in this spot. Obviously, very volatile, but I do like him. He's accounted for, I believe it's 18 to 19% of Rosen's passes since Rosen has become the starter. So definitely someone that has his attention. They did play in college together, so that does help. I also don't hate Fitzgerald, man. I really don't hate this passing game for Arizona. The Niners have really struggled here against the pass, but I do think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Fitzgerald is actually no, he's expected to get Quan Williams here or K'Wan Williams, but Christian Kirk is just in such a better spot. He's expected to see Greg Maben in what Pro Football Focus has a 21% advantage rating on. Maben has a 47.6 grade, which is well below average here. I just think, in tournaments where Crabtree might be a little bit popular, where Demaryius Thomas might see some ownership, where people might go back to the wall on Kearse. I think Kirk could go completely overlooked at 4,500 and offers a ton of upside, man.
Yeah, no, I like the Kirk call. Obviously, the shower narrative, they got that going. So it seems like it's
there's always some type of narrative. Huh?
Not the worst stat line. You need to have those stats. Those are important stats to bring up. And then on top of it, yeah, no. I like Kirk to Rosen to Kirk. I'd probably just roster Kirk. Kirk will probably be the only one that makes my player pool. As far as Fitzgerald, I'm not going to go there.
It's tough, man. It is, but I don't hate him this week.
Last year, he was like Benjamin Button last season. He was great play week in, week out. This year, it's kind of caught up to him. I'm going to lean Kirk in the Arizona offense and Mostert in the San Francisco 49ers offense, and that's pretty much hitting on this week for this game.
Yeah. And just to give some people an idea here, the Cardinals have allowed 10 rushing touchdowns this season, 959 rushing yards, man, in 7 games, 347 receiving yards to running backs, 2 receiving touchdowns. They've just been atrocious. So I really don't think there's going to be any need for this offense, and I'm talking about the San Francisco offense, to have to pass the ball here, which is why I don't like some of their pass catchers. I think it's going to be all on the ground really this week for the San Francisco defense. So if Mostert gets to start here, I think he's pretty much a lock in all formats. He's going to be popular, but I'm okay with that without a doubt. And to
running back too.
I think he looked pretty sharp. He's been very efficient with the amount of in the limited time I've seen him and the limited time, a limited opportunity he's received so far. He's been pretty efficient. So I agree with you, man. I do think it's a great spot here for him. Look, to point out something here for David Johnson, the Niners have been pretty susceptible against the run here, allowing 601 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. They've also given up 45 receptions, 334 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns to running backs, allowing 28.9 DraftKings fantasy points per game. So this is certainly a good spot for Johnson. But again, not to be the dead horse here, but you got guys like Kareem Hunt, you got guys, like James Conner in just great matchups. Kareem Hunt, 7,100, and Dave Johnson, 67. I'm going to definitely find a way to get that extra 400 to plug him in this week. That's kind of where I stand. I just feel like he's oddly priced, and there's too many other great options for me to consider him. However, I wouldn't be surprised for him to have a big game.
Yeah, no, I get you.
All right. Any final thoughts here before we move on to the last game of the slate? One that I'm sure will have a ton of ownership, arguably, or more likely, going to be the most popular game of the week.
Yeah, let's get into it. Green Bay and the Rams.
Absolutely. A 56.5 over-under. Opened at 57. 73% of the bets are going to the over here, which is very surprising to me when you look at a over under this high. The Rams have a 33 implied team total. The Packers have a 23.5 implied team total. 9.5 point dogs are Green Bay on the road here. Give me your thoughts. I know you are very, very high on the Rams this week. Break it down for us.
Yeah, I think I like Goff a lot. I think he's in a fantastic spot. Both quarterbacks in this game are in a fantastic spot. Um, really like Gurley. Rams offense runs through Gurley right now. We don't have um, a designation on Cooper Kupp, so it makes me like Gurley even more. And it actually, a lot of the stuff the Rams do when they run 11 personnel is they run stretch plays with Gurley. And I watched San Francisco do this with Mostert 2 weeks ago versus Green Bay, and they had a ton of success. And I just see one running back having that kind of running the same way, like in the same situation, a Todd Gurley versus a Raheem Mostert. It's like two different, like two different running backs completely. But Mostert had success. Like I think Todd Gurley is going to have uber success. He's going to have a fantastic game at 10K. Should make value. I don't think the price matters with Todd Gurley at this point. And then I like Robert Woods as well. Think that he's going to be utilized in the passing game and at his price. I think he's at 6,300, 200 above TY. He's another guy that kind of lock in on cash games, I would say. I just like the Rams stack. That's pretty much kind of where I'm going.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm on to something. I don't know if this is just coincidence. But Goff has been so much better at home this season than he has been on the road. In fact, when you look at his road games, he has failed to score over 19.34 DraftKings points. However, at home, he has scored no less than 22 DraftKings points per game, or in a single game, 22.36, 29.56, and 42.3. Mind you, this was –
You can't hear McVay.
Huh?
He can't hear McVay tell him where to throw the ball before pre-snap.
And I agree. I think that has something to do with it. You know,
that's really what it probably is.
I think that's a great. You know, that's good note taking there because I wouldn't be surprised if that is the case. I think Goff is one of the top quarterback plays of the week. I am hoping that people are looking at that game log and seeing, you know, the last couple of weeks he hasn't been that efficient, and they're kind of going to go overlooked here. I do think this is just a smash spot for him. I expect this to be a shootout here, so I do like him quite a bit. I'm not going to lie, you know, and this is something that I pointed out earlier in the year that it's tough when the you know when he's not throwing a ton for him to be very efficient. He had been throwing a pretty decent amount, over 32 pass attempts in each of the first 5 games. But the last 2 weeks, you know, 28 and 24, they've been relying a little bit more on Gurley, which is kind of concerning. However, I do think this game environment does set up nicely for someone like Goff here this week. So, and last week, you know, just the blowout factor, obviously something that you have to consider. So, as far as you know, Gurley, to me, he's in play every week. If you can find the money, and I think this week you should be able to find the money, go ahead and play him. I don't hate the idea of playing both Goff and Gurley. I feel like I've said that in previous shows, and it's simply because you're pretty much gonna get all the touchdowns for this offense. You know, Robert Woods didn't pan out for me last week. I liked him quite a bit, and he just let me down. Caught 5 of 7 targets, no touchdowns, 13.4 fantasy points, 78 yards. I do think this is another good matchup here for him. I like him. I'm going to go back to the well here. He's expected to see coverage from Josh Jackson, a matchup where Woods has an 18% advantage rating in, according to Pro Football Focus. So I think it's in a good spot here for him. I'm hoping that because he let people down last week, he will not be as popular. I'm looking here at his projected ownership, 70 to 20%. So I could be wrong as far as maybe recency bias affecting his ownership. Although I do think if he's in that range of 17%, I think that's under-owned considering the game situation here for him. Brandon Cooks for me is also in play. I just, you know, I feel much better about Woods. I feel there might be some more consistency. Woods is actually cheaper as well. So I feel more comfortable with Woods' floor, and I think they both have very similar upside here. So I lean more towards Woods in this situation. Are you interested in the Packer side of the ball here?
Yeah, Devontae Adams. I don't really care who's covering him. I'm probably gonna play him.
Yeah, Marcus Peters is who is expected to be covering him. And Adams has a 19% advantage rating, so it's pretty decent here.
Yeah, Adams is just like cornerback prone. Xavier Rhodes is on Adams. I'm still playing Adams. So
yeah,
I don't know, this game environment, I want to roster Adams. Interesting to see who's going to be in the slot. I think it's going to be Valdez Scantling, I think. Am I correct?
Well, it all depends. So a couple of injury things to keep an eye on. Cooper Kupp is doubtful. Let's just, pretty much rule him out here. I don't think he's going to play. Geronimo Addison is expected to play. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury. He hasn't been able to play since week 4. Cobb has also been battling, a hamstring injury that's kept him out since week 3. Both of these guys are expected to play, so that's going to change a lot here for this passing game, which is why it's difficult really to, be too excited about anyone right now. Especially two guys that can be productive, but they're both coming off a hamstring injury. I do have some interest here in Cobb, just because he's very cheap, and if they're going to be chasing points and he's playing, he's on the field. Last game he played, 11 targets. He's only played 3 games this season, but these are the targets here. It's 10, 6, 11. Has been very involved all season long when on the field. He's only 4,900. Again, another cheap option at receiver in a good potential game environment, with arguably the best quarterback in the game throwing him the ball. So like him, although I do prioritize Adams, I think he is by far the best play on this offense here. Any interest in someone like Cobb at 4,900, or is that not a place you really want to go this week?
No, I'm not against any of the Green Bay pass catchers. I was just wondering if Cobb was if he still had a Q tag or.
Yeah, he is. He is. Him and Addison both have Q tags. They're both dealing with the hamstring injury. I believe they've been able to get some limited practice, and both are on track to play this week, barring any setbacks, of course. We'll definitely have that information Sunday morning when we do our Sunday live show for footballdiehards.com. Any other tight end or any tight end here, Jimmy Graham or anything?
Yeah. Jimmy Graham, Gerald Everett is even a possibility if Cooper Kupp sits. I like him in tournaments as a deep GPP flyer, but we have a ton of tight end value like we talked about. The main thing for me on the Green Bay side is Rodgers and Adams. And then just wait on the injury news and see how things are going to break down.
Yeah, I'm with you there, man. Any final thoughts on the slate? I mean, we're done. We broke down pretty much every game. We're doing good timing here. Any final thoughts on the slate? I think there's a lot of value, man. I think roster construction this week should be very interesting. I think it's going to be very, stars and scrubs type. Like, I guess that's the basketball language, but I do think that you're going to see that kind of roster construction where you see some high-end players and then a lot of value players on a lot of rosters this week. It's just a matter of how you want to do it. I think there's certainly ways to pay up for guys like Gurley, certainly ways to pay up for, guys like Antonio Brown. There are 2 receivers that we kind of overlooked a little bit. I want to point them out because I do think they're in interesting spots. One of them, Devin Funchess. We really didn't talk much about him. We don't like this Panthers offense that much, but it's difficult to ignore his efficiency as of late. The volume is there, and he's fairly priced. So don't hate him. I'm not going to be playing him, but I feel like I'd be doing a disservice not talking about him. And the other guy is Tyler Lockett, also in a pretty good spot here and reasonably priced. I am not going to be targeting him much this week either, but I do think that we should have talked about these 2 receivers because I think their efficiency and their production it causes us to at least have some interest in them. Any thoughts on either of those two guys before we wrap this up?
I like Fungus. I like Lockett. The main thing that I would do in terms of roster construction this week is go to that Green Bay and the Rams game. That being one of the main games you're going to build your lineups around, and then kind of try to simplify the slate from there. Try to make it, what's it, it's a 10-game slate?
Yes, 10 games. Yeah.
Trying to like get those two or three games that you're really going to pull guys from, and then just kind of build your player pool like that. So I don't think I think the Pittsburgh game is going to be pretty interesting. The KC game, both sides of it. I don't know. Those guys from those games would be the guys that kind of stuff in my player pool.
Yeah. Any final thoughts here before we go on the rest of the slate? I think we like I said, we covered it. You broke it down pretty good there. I think Sunday we're gonna have a lot more answers to some of these injury questions. So make sure you guys tune in over at footballdiehards.com. Our Sunday live show. We do it every weekend at 11 a.m. We'll have up-to-date news. We're typically on, and a lot of news is popping in during that time. So it'll be a good time to jump on, kind of hear how any of this news is impacting our construction and kind of changing how we're approaching the slate. Also, make sure to follow Bobby and myself on Twitter right now. Football Diehards is running a promotion, 2 free weeks, getting all the content. Bobby has a bunch of articles there. You'll be able to get our shows, which are behind the paywall. You'll be able to just pretty much get access to everything at Diehards. There is so much in there. We have snap counts. We have red zone information. We have shadow coverages, a bunch of different useful tools that I strongly recommend you go check out. Bobby, let everyone know where they can follow you and ask you for that link on Twitter and on Instagram.
Yeah, Bobby Gomes DFS on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Armando, thanks for having me once again.
It is my pleasure.
Looking forward to
Yeah, man, me too. It's always fun, man. Listen, I said this earlier in the show, and I've said this multiple times. I enjoy doing this with you every week, man. We sit here and grind it out, talk about football. It's a blessing that we get to do this each and every week, a couple times a week. I am at Armando_Marsaw on both Twitter and Instagram. If you guys want that link, make sure to reach out to Bobby or myself. We'll provide you that. You'll get 2 free weeks from the day you sign up. And, it's great. You got a lot of great content there. You got John Lobb, Bobby Gomes, myself. You got Jen Ryan, Bob Harris, so many people there. Justin Lanero, tons of content there that you can, pretty much pick and choose from and read. So definitely go check it out, guys. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a pleasure as always, and we will catch you next week.